They seem distant, unreachable, untouched by love. But the truth is, when no one is watching, their world looks very different. The avoidant carries private rituals, habits, little secret routines that reveal everything about the love they won't admit and the fears they cannot face. And if you've ever wondered what really happens in the silence, this will take you inside. When the avoidant closes the door behind them, the mask they wear for the world slowly begins to slip. To everyone else, they seem strong, independent, self-contained, but in the quiet, their rituals expose the vulnerability they guard so carefully. Some avoidants scroll through old photos they swore they deleted. They tell themselves they're over it. Yet in the stillness of night, they revisit memories that both comfort and haunt them. These photos are not about nostalgia. They are about control, a way of touching love without having to risk closeness. Others replay conversations in their heads, the ones they shut down too quickly, the words they didn't say, the affection they buried. In public, they may laugh at the idea of missing someone, but alone, they whisper apologies to a room that never hears them. This is the paradox of the avoidant. They fear exposure, yet in secret, they ache with the intimacy they reject in real life. Their rituals often extend into the smallest details, the way they keep certain gifts hidden away. A book, a sweater, a note tucked into a drawer, not displayed, not spoken of, but never thrown out. This is their private museum of love, a place only they visit. For them, these objects hold meaning that words could never capture. They represent the closeness they couldn't tolerate out loud, but couldn't fully erase either. At night, many avoidants engage in a ritual of escape, streaming endless shows, burying themselves in video games, or drowning in work projects long after everyone else has gone to bed. This isn't just distraction, it's self-protection, because when the noise stops, the truth begins to rise, and the silence feels dangerous. Silence reminds them of the love they pushed away, the tenderness they secretly longed for, the risk they couldn't take. So they fill the quiet with ritual, with patterns that keep emotions just out of reach. But here's the part they would never admit. These rituals are not about indifference. They are about obsession. Avoidants do not walk away untouched. They carry the weight of connection into their solitude. Every repeated action, checking your profile, remembering your laugh, holding on to small tokens, is their way of loving without being caught. It is love lived in the shadows, love without risk, love that costs them peace, because it never finds expression. The tragedy is, these private rituals rarely bring comfort. Instead, they deepen the loneliness, because no matter how many times they replay the memory, the reality remains. You are not there. They chose distance, but the heart doesn't always obey. And so they live with an unfinished story that they rewrite in silence, night after night. This is why being with an avoidant feels so confusing. What you see on the outside, the coldness, the withdrawal, the silence, is only half the truth. The other half is hidden in these rituals. They may never confess it. They may never show it. But in the quiet, their actions betray them. Because what we do in secret always tells the story. Our words refuse to speak. If you want to understand the avoidant, you cannot rely on what they say. You have to look at what they do when no one is looking, because their rituals are not random. They are coded messages, signals of what they crave and what terrifies them. One ritual you'll notice is the way they retreat into routine. An avoidant might clean obsessively, not because the dishes really matter, but because scrubbing a plate is easier than facing the ache in their chest. They fold clothes with precision. They organize shelves. They immerse themselves in order. Because love feels like chaos. This ritual of control is how they silence the voice inside that whispers of connection. If everything is neat, if everything is in place, then maybe the longing will quiet down too. But of course, it never does. Another private ritual is the creation of safe spaces. An avoidant may retreat to the same corner of the couch, the same chair by the window, the same desk late at night. These are not just physical spots. They are fortresses, places where the avoidant feels untouchable, shielded from emotional demands. You might think they are just comfortable there, but the truth is, those spaces are sacred because in them, they get to feel both present and hidden. And often, those safe spaces are where their hidden emotions leak out. It's where they listen to songs that break them open, songs they would never play in your presence, because the lyrics speak the feelings they cannot admit. It's where they reread old texts, scrolling up and down the thread, like archaeologists of their own heart. It's where they let a tear fall, just one, maybe two, and then quickly wipe it away, afraid even the empty room might betray them. Avoidants live in this contradiction. They don't want you to see their softness, but in private, they cannot escape it. This is why their rituals matter, because rituals are a mirror of the self. They reveal the tenderness they work so hard to bury. Another ritual is mental rehearsal. Avoidants often run imaginary scenarios in their minds. They picture you calling them. They imagine the words they would say. Sharp, dismissive, guarded. But then, in the very next breath, they rehearse a softer version. The version where they let their guard down, where they admit they miss you, where they beg you not to walk away. They will never say it out loud, but in their mind, they let the scene play out over and over again. It is their way of staying connected without risk, but it is also their curse, because by living in what-ifs, they avoid the what-is. They let relationships slip away while holding on to ghost versions of love in their imagination. You'll also notice rituals of substitution. An avoidant who feels lonely may not call you, but they'll reach for comfort in familiar replacements. Food, scrolling endlessly through social media, pouring another glass of wine, shopping for things they don't need. These rituals are stand-ins for intimacy. They are ways of soothing the emptiness without ever facing the real cause of it. And here's what's striking. Most avoidants would deny that these habits mean anything. They'll laugh them off, say they're just quirks, act like it's nothing. But to the trained eye, these are confessions. Confessions they don't even realize they're making. Because behind every ritual is a longing they can't quite erase. Even when they choose solitude, their actions whisper, "I am not as detached as I seem." This is why being in love with an avoidant feels like a riddle. You sense the truth. You catch the glimpses. You notice the cracks in the armor, but they won't validate it. They won't say, "Yes, you're right. I feel more than I show." Instead, they leave you piecing together the evidence, and their rituals become the trail of crumbs that proves what they can't admit. The longer you watch, the more you realize their life is full of these hidden patterns, and every single one tells the same story. That love is not absent. It is only exiled into the private, the hidden, the secret corners of their world. And while the avoidant may think they are protecting themselves, the truth is they are living in half shadows. Love without expression, longing without resolution, closeness without closeness. It is a life of rituals, Instead of relationships, they seem indifferent, unmoved, like nothing gets through. But when the door closes, when silence replaces conversation, their private world begins. A world built on ritual, routines not shared, behaviors not explained. This is where the avoidant finally breathes. Not because they don't love you, but because this is where they feel control. Control over their space, control over their emotions, control over the story they tell themselves. Behind the mask, their rituals begin small, closing their phone and putting it face down, turning off notifications, not because they don't want to hear from you, but because they can't risk being pulled too close. The ping of a message feels like pressure. The vibration of a call feels like a demand. And in their hidden rituals, they rewrite pressure into safety. They'll take long showers, not just to clean, but to think. Water becomes a shield. The sound drowns out everything else. It's their way of resetting. They'll spend hours rearranging small things, cleaning a desk, folding laundry that was already folded, wiping the same countertop over and over. Not because it matters, but because order outside gives them peace inside. Their rituals are less about efficiency and more about soothing. In private, they replay conversations, not out loud, not with words, but with fragments of memory. The look you gave them, the tone of your voice, the way you leaned in. They study it like a puzzle, not to get closer, but to protect themselves from needing more. They'll reframe what you said, sometimes softening it, sometimes twisting it, always shaping it into a version that keeps them safe. If you said, "I miss you," they'll rewrite it as pressure. If you said, "I'm here for you," they'll rewrite it as expectation. It's not what you meant, but it's what they need to believe, to survive intimacy. And in that survival, their rituals continue. They'll light candles at night, not for romance, not for beauty, but for comfort. The glow makes solitude feel chosen, not lonely. They'll lose themselves in scrolling, not because they're entertained, but because endless feeds distract them from endless feelings. Busyness is their armor. Silence is their refuge. Distance is their reset. But rituals don't just hide fear. They also reveal obsession. They'll check your profile. They'll hover over your messages. They'll read old texts, but never reply. Sometimes they'll type a message and delete it before sending. Over and over, a silent ritual of connection. They can't bring themselves to risk. You might think they're gone, that they don't care, but their private rituals say otherwise. Your presence lingers in their absence. They are tethered to you quietly, like a shadow you don't see. And sometimes, their rituals betray them. They'll wear the sweater you gave them, not outside, not in public, but in their room, where no one can see the comfort it brings. They'll re-listen to songs you once shared, not to relive memories, but to keep the bond alive without admitting it. They'll even keep things you thought they'd thrown away. A note, a receipt, a photo buried deep in a drawer. Because their private world is not about forgetting you. It's about managing how much of you they can bear. And this is what makes their rituals powerful. They let the avoidant stay connected, without the vulnerability of being seen. So while you wonder if they've moved on, they are still orbiting you. Not openly, not obviously, but in ways you will never be invited to witness. Their rituals are not random. They are survival strategies, ways to feel closeness, without the terror of being exposed. And so, the avoidant lives between two realities, the world you see and the world they hide, one polished with indifference, the other trembling with need. And it's in these hidden rituals, when no one is watching, that the truth of their attachment is revealed. They'll never admit it. They'll never tell you. But even in their rituals of distance, something else takes shape. Fear, longing, and the sharp edge of contradiction. The avoidant spends so much energy creating space to feel safe, but in the quiet they carve out, another truth rises. They miss what they ran from. It shows up in small ways. The book they reach for, the one you once talked about together, the song they replay, the one you danced to in the kitchen, the memory that intrudes when they least expect it. Their rituals may start as control, but they almost always end in collision. A collision with the very feelings they wanted to escape. Because no matter how tightly they close the door, emotions have a way of slipping through. They'll lie in bed, scrolling endlessly, pretending they're lost in distractions. But then your face appears in their mind, uninvited, and suddenly, distraction feels like betrayal. Betrayal of the very distance they swore to maintain. And here's the paradox. In private, the avoidant lets themselves feel more than they ever show, but only when they know no one else can see. Tears they would never cry in front of you fall quietly at 2 a.m., not because they don't care, but because caring terrifies them, and hiding it feels safer than risking rejection. Their rituals are stitched with this duality: distance and closeness, numbness and longing, silence and memory. And sometimes, their rituals become rehearsals. They'll practice conversations they may never have. Standing in the mirror, they'll imagine what it would be like to apologize, to admit, to say, "I do love you. I was just scared." But when the rehearsal ends, silence takes the stage again, because in their world, fantasy feels safer than risk. It's not just emotional rituals either. They also create routines that shield their body from closeness. They'll place pillows between themselves and others. They'll sleep curled away, as if even in unconsciousness, their body remembers to guard. They'll walk with headphones in, not to listen to music, but to avoid the possibility of interaction. They'll overcommit to work, projects, fitness routines, not because they're always passionate, but because busyness disguises avoidance. It gives them a socially acceptable excuse to keep love at arm's length. But beneath all these rituals, one pattern repeats. Avoidants are trying to manage a storm that feels unmanageable. Love feels like fire to them, warm, beautiful, but dangerous. So their rituals become firewalls. And yet, in the flicker of their private world, the truth slips out. They'll whisper your name without realizing. They'll dream about you and wake unsettled. They'll reread messages not to analyze, but to feel the pulse of connection again. Because the one thing their rituals cannot erase is the fact that they do care. Care is the thread running through every ritual, even when disguised as detachment, even when cloaked in silence, even when rewritten as control. And here's the hardest truth. They care so much that it overwhelms them. And that overwhelm is what fuels their rituals in the first place. So when you wonder if they ever think about you, they do. Not always with words, not always in ways you'd recognize, but in rituals stitched with memory, with longing, with the ache of what they cannot say. And while you feel invisible in their silence, know this: their private rituals keep you closer than they will ever admit out loud. Because in their solitude, you never leave. They think their rituals are secret. They think no one knows. But the truth is, their silence speaks louder than words. Because what someone hides tells you just as much as what they show. The avoidant may never confess it, but their rituals reveal the storm inside. Every late-night scroll, every endless workout, every carefully constructed wall. It's all a language, just not one they'll ever translate for you. And here's the paradox. What they fear the most is exposure. Not exposure of weakness, but exposure of love. Because to them, love feels like danger. It feels like a spotlight, shining on everything they don't know how to control. So they hide, they disappear, they create rituals that give them the illusion of safety. But illusions crack, and rituals, no matter how carefully kept, begin to betray them. A song choice betrays them. A glance at your photo betrays them. The way they hesitate before deleting your number betrays them. Because deep down, their rituals are not about forgetting. They're about holding on in a way that feels safer than staying close. And you might ask yourself, if they care so much, why don't they just show it? The answer lies in fear. Fear of engulfment, fear of rejection, fear of being known, down to the soft, raw parts they don't even want to see themselves. So the rituals become both prison and shield. They protect, but they also isolate. And in that isolation, the avoidance suffers quietly. Because while they build walls for safety, those same walls keep love out. They will tell themselves, I'm fine alone. I don't need anyone. This is better. But the rituals whisper otherwise. The late-night messages typed and unsent. The pictures saved in hidden folders. The way they linger on your name in their contacts. That's not indifference. That's longing, disguised as control. And this is what you must understand. Their rituals don't mean you weren't enough. They don't mean you weren't loved. They mean their nervous system chose survival over intimacy. It doesn't excuse the hurt. It doesn't erase the distance. But it explains the paradox. How someone can love deeply and still run from the very thing they want most. Because when avoidants are left alone, their rituals become confessions. They confess the love they're afraid to speak. They confess the ache they're afraid to feel. They confess the truth they don't have words for. So if you've ever doubted it, know this. You mattered more than you think. You still matter more than they'll admit. But the rituals are not your burden. They are theirs. Their healing, their choice, their path to walk. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is step back, not to punish them, not to provoke them, but to protect your own heart. Because you deserve love that isn't hidden in rituals, love that doesn't require decoding, love that shows itself openly, freely, without fear. Yes, avoidants have their private world, but so do you. And your rituals shouldn't be about waiting in silence. They should be about living fully. Theirs may be about hiding, but yours can be about healing. And maybe one day, if they face themselves, they'll open the door. But even if they don't, you don't have to live in their shadows. Because love, real love, is not meant to be buried in secret rituals. It's meant to be shared, spoken, lived. So ask yourself, what rituals will you choose? Ones of waiting or ones of becoming? Because while they may hide in silence, you have the chance to step into the light. And maybe that's the invitation you've been waiting for all along.